Ashton Chase, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, Guyana mourn the loss of a tremendous son, one who has spent almost a century, but 70 years of that life, struggling for the liberation, the independence, for human rights, for freedom, and for workers' rights in this country. One whose 70 years career spanned that period, but was always crowned with struggles and successes. The towering figure of Ashton Chase during his lifetime never understand losing, never know about losing, but always was positive. He was a champion fighter. It is because of this reason, at a very early age, Chase became involved in the labor movement. It is said, and I quote Shakespeare, "Some are born great, some achieve greatness, and some have greatness thrust upon them." Ashton Chase achieved greatness, and that role started since he was young. As age 16, he became involved in the Guyana Labor Union. By age 22, he became an official of the Guyana Labor Union. At the age of 18, though, there was a recognized union in the sugar industry. Ashton walked the fields and factories with Hubert Nathaniel Critchlow, seeking to enhance and improve working conditions in the sugar industry. Ashton Chase became not only active in the labor movement, but at an early age formed the Political Affairs Committee of the People's Progressive Party alongside Cheddi Jagan, Janet Jagan, and Joycelyn Hubbard. They marched on from that period. He did not lose sight of the working people. He educated himself, though he was from a poor and humble background, had virtually poverty around him, and depended more or less on relatives, particularly an aunt, for sustenance most of the time. That aunt encouraged him, motivated him, and with his father and others, he continued a life and he journeyed on. I think his successful career as a young man began when he piloted the Labor Amendment Bill in 1953. And that bill was to give recognition for workers, the Union of the Workers' Choice. At that time, workers were struggling in the sugar industry to remove the trade union that they had representing them. They called that union the Manpower Citizens Association a company union. And so they wanted a new union. But the sugar barons resisted that strenuously. And so Ashton thought of enacting legislation which would make it compulsory for the workers to have a union of their choice. When that bill was passed, the British government at that time, The colonial masters will have none of it. And so immediately after that, on the 9th, they disbanded the government, suspended the constitution, and Ashton's letter of revocation of his minister portfolio, like those of the others, went via policemen knocking at his door and handing him that edict. So there was no more a government. The colonial masters continued. Unmoved, Ashton Chase decided to continue the fight and agitated in the Union. He moved thereafter into the sugar industry in 1965, became active first as an honorary president, and in 1966, the president of the National Association of Agricultural, Commercial, and Industrial Employees, NASI. NASI prior to that was SICA, the Sugar Estate Clerks Association. But as I said earlier, previously, Ashton became a beacon light in the sugar industry and mobilized and brought workers together. In fact, he brought 3 other unions into the fold of NASI, from the dispensers, the sugar boilers, and the supervisors union. Ashton started his writing immediately after the suspension of the Constitution, and he produced 133 Days Towards Freedom. He then wrote the book which became the Bible for the working class, A History of Trade Unionism in Guyana, and did several other publications after that: Burnham, A Nation in Transit, Trade Union Law in the Caribbean, Glimpses of Trade Unions in the Caribbean. He wrote also Arise Africa, after he felt that Africa was becoming dormant. The history of Ashton Chase, spanning 70 years, cannot ever be completed in writing. His work, his activities were so many that one cannot find the time to even document them all. I was privileged to document a few hundred pages of his work, and titled Ashton Chase, the Bengal Tiger. He earned that name when he was fighting for the sugar workers. In fact, they called Chedi also the Bengal Tiger. And in Resistance and Change and Striving Towards Unity, 2 other books, a lot of Ashton's work became known and publicized. But most importantly was Ashton's struggle around the bargaining table, in negotiations, at arbitrations, and then after in the court of law, where some landmark cases, and you'll hear of them today, or you'll read about them in these works. But I'm not going to keep you longer. I'm going to just say this, that whatever sugar workers achieved, whatever improvement they had, it was as a result of the struggles of Chedi Jagan, Janet Jagan, Ashton Chase, and Boise Ramkaran. Those 4 stalwarts were always in the sugar belt. Together they fought, but Ashton fought separately a battle in the courts and around the arbitration table, the skills which only he had. And so the victories have been achieved one after the other. And I say today that in some of the struggles, Ashton having going about speaking, he said to us, you have to stand up and fight for what you believe in. Because if you don't stand up, your opponent will come and hit you. They first will slap you. And you don't do anything, they will cuff you. And then you don't do anything, they will kick you over the wall. And then if you don't stand up again, they'll spit on you. He motivated people to stand up and fight for what they believe in. That message resonates in my ears some 50 years now. As I stand here today, there are many motivational speeches that Ashton would make in the sugar community to tell workers what is worthwhile having is worthwhile fighting for. They reached a time, if he had said, "Mischief thou art afoot, take what course thou wilt," as Mark Antony did over the body of Caesar, the country might have been in turmoil. But he stopped short of violence because he was not a violent leader. None of the leaders in the People's Progressive Party are violent people. They are peace-loving. Though they believe in fighting for their rights, they will never give up. And so Ashton taught us that in the 70-odd years of struggle, fight for what you believe in, fight for what is right, fight for your human rights, fight for democracy, and fight for everything that is good to make your country and yourself prosperous. With that, I call on Dr. Roland Chase, the son of Ashton Chase, to bring the eulogy this morning. Dr. Chase.
Thank you, Mr. Gopal. Good morning, His Excellency President Ali, distinguished guests, family and friends. First, on behalf of my stepmom, the widow Deborah, my sisters Pauline and Sarita, and the entire Chase family, I wish to thank you all for coming out today to pay tribute to our father, husband, grandfather, Ashton Alton Chase, the Bengal Tiger. First, I wanted to come and talk to you about him for 5 to 10 minutes and give you the highlights of his career. But I didn't think I could make it through 5 to 10 minutes without breaking down, so I wrote it down. So forgive me for reading this. This is the most difficult thing I've ever had to do. It is difficult at best to stand before you and attempt to honor this great man in words. It is never an easy task to capture someone special in a speech, as words frequently fall short of capturing someone's true essence. In the case of Ashton Chase, they fall so far below the mark that I felt it was futile to try. Nevertheless, I will attempt to do so. But before I do, I'm going to ask each of us gathered here today to sit in silence for a moment and remember something about Ashton Chase, who touched each of our lives in so many ways. Ashton Alton Chase was born on Sunday, July 18, 1926, in Hatfield Street, Workingham, Georgetown. He was born to an impoverished family. His parents were Cleopatra King and Samuel Chase, better known as Sam Chase, the comedian. His grandmother, Adriana King, better known as Da to him, was the beacon of his support and introduced him to the trade unionism at an early age as she was deeply involved in the movement. Ashton attended primary school at St. Andrew Scots School in Georgetown, and then Allen's High School in Regent Street. He worked hard at school to secure his junior Cambridge certificate. At 17 years old, he went to work at the British Guiana Labor Union, and later he secured his senior Cambridge certificate and then registered as an external student at London University. There he secured the intermediate Bachelor of Laws degree privately. He was then employed in a clerical post in British Guiana Labor Union, earning much less than he could have earned elsewhere. But trade unionism was his calling. He was the admirer of Hubert Nathaniel Critchlow and had the opportunity to work with him. Ashton served as a secretary, or assistant secretary of the BGLU early in his career. He secured a British Trade Union Congress scholarship in 1948 that enabled him to study economics at Ruskin College, Oxford, and trade unionism in London. It also included a short course at the ILO in Geneva, Switzerland. Ashton Chase, along with former Presidents Cheddy Jagan and Janet Jagan and H.A.M. Hubbard, formed the Political Affairs Committee in 1946. The PAC was a precursor of the formation of the People's Progressive Party in 1950. After the People's victory at the 1953 elections, Ashton was named the first Minister of Labour of British Guiana. The British would later suspend the Constitution, and Ashton subsequently left for England, where he pursued studies in law. He graduated with honors from the University of London and was introduced to the bar at Gray's Inn in 1957. Upon his return from England, he began to build a law practice, specializing in labor law in 1961. In 1961, he was appointed president of the Senate by the PPP government and later served as a PPP member of parliament. He was for many years the president of the National Association of Agricultural, Commercial, and Industrial Employees, better known as NASI, which itself played an important role in the struggle for trade unions and electoral democracy. And he remained honorary president of that organization until today. He was a member of the GARD, the Guyanese Action for Reform and Democracy movement, which had emerged in the later 1980s to join the fight for free and fair elections. He was co-founder and chairman of the Guyana Legal Aid Clinic, providing free legal service. Ashton Chase has made major contributions to legal learning by the number of cases he fought in Guyana's Court of Appeal. These cases have made legal and constitutional history. He was the author of several texts on labor law and other topics, including A History of Trade Unionism in Guyana from 1900 to 1961, 133 Days Towards Freedom in Guyana, The Law of Workmen's Compensation, Industrial Law, Trade Union in the Caribbean, and Industrial Relations. He also wrote a book called Arise Africa, which I just learned about last night. The first, which is the History of Trade Unionism in Guyana from 1900 to 1961, should be read by everyone who wants to have a knowledge of one of the most important aspects of our history. Ashton Chase was a senior counsel, anointed in 1985, a distinction that he was denied for many years for political reasons. He's also the recipient of the Order of Excellence, the highest distinction that can be bestowed on any Guyanese for distinction and eminence in the field of human endeavor. He was also listed as one of the 10 professionals in the world by the International Biographical Center in England in 2002. Ashton Chase served with distinction as the chairman of the legal education of the West Indies for many years and played an instrumental role in the automatic entry of the Bachelor of Law graduates from the University of Guyana into the Hugh Wooding Law School of Trinidad and Tobago. He has been the only Guyanese to serve in that capacity. Mr. Chase led the Bar Association as its president for many years, including during the tumultuous years of political dictatorship in Guyana, opposing the government on several occasions at a time when it was personally hazardous to do so. There were many significant achievements of the Bar under his presidency, too many to go through today. Ashton Chase also served as president of the Republic Bank of Guyana Limited. In addition, he served as member of the Public Service Commission from 1970 to 1974 and vice president of the Guyana Economic Society from 1971 to 1973. He was also a member of the University of Guyana Board of Governors from 1964 to 1965. Ashton Chase was also a member of the Lodge Harmony 1110. He was past master of this lodge. He was also a past master of the Guyana Lodge of Research. He has been a leading struggle in the struggle for democracy in Guyana, leading figure in the struggle for democracy in Guyana from 1946 to 1992. He's rendered remarkable contributions in the areas of trade unionism, politics, the legal profession, and legal education in the West Indies. He's made a lasting impact of almost equal magnitude in each of these fields. He advanced the cause of trade unionism by utilizing his legal prowess in taking numerous trade union struggles into the halls of justice, winning major victories for the labor and labor movement, and continued to do so until his early 90s when the pandemic struck. He has secured his name permanently in the political foundation of both pre- and post-independent Guyana. He's very proud that the party that he founded is currently in government today. He is a historic, unique, and unforgettable father figure for Guyana, the Caribbean, and the Commonwealth, whose accomplishments was matched by his humility. On a more personal note, Ashton Chase was a family man, despite wearing all those hats we just talked about. He was always there for everyone, family, neighbors, colleagues, or friends. He was a very humble man, and we are incredibly blessed to have had him as our dad, husband, granddad, father-in-law, friend. He was a simple man. He didn't need material things to make him happy, just the company of his family and friends. He was always the life of the party, and he could make anyone laugh. We shall cherish those memories forever. For 4 to 6 years, Ashton and Debbie, Ashton's widow, have shared everything life can offer together. They were a great team, supporting each other in every way. Together, they kept the family together. Dad was hardworking, compassionate towards everyone, and deserved the rich success and rich life that he enjoyed. Dad's love was unconditional, and this is something we shall cherish from his character and take with us forever. His kindness and generosity will be remembered by all who had the pleasure of knowing him. To say our father was a good man would be an understatement. He was an amazing man who always put others first. I never saw him lose his temper or say an unkind word to anyone. He was always patient and kind, even when dealing with the most difficult people. You know, dads are someone to look up to, someone to follow, someone to admire, someone to be proud of, and someone to brag about, someone to hold and someone to cry with, someone to learn from and someone to respect, someone to listen to and someone to talk to, someone to try and impress, sometimes to rebel against, and someone, most of all, with whom to share everything this wonderful life has to offer. Sarita, Pauline, and I are so incredibly grateful that we can all say today that we've had all this and much, much more with our dad. Dad always put his family first and was always there for us when we needed him. He was the patriarch of our family and always so proud of his children and grandchildren and our accomplishments, no matter how small. He ensured that we had everything we needed, even if it meant sacrificing his wants and needs. He would do anything for us and always went above and beyond to make sure we were happy and healthy. His encouragement and support meant the world to us, and we should always cherish his words of wisdom. What we learned from our father was that life is short and often brutal. He didn't think he would live this long. And the best way to combat all that is with a good laugh and an ability to appreciate his small moments of joy despite any circumstances. We're going to miss him. His decency, sincerity, and kind soul will stay with us forever. When it came to how he lived his life, there was no unfinished business. He had no regrets. I visited with him a few months ago and I was enlightened. In a moment, I knew that our dad, for those years of selflessness, and was finally about to realize the true reward. Not reward financially, not reward in material things or in professional accomplishments, but rather the reward of a man who leaves this earth knowing that he knows his best. He did his best consistently and persistently to make the world a better place for those around him. This is a just reward for Ashton Chase and provides great solace to all of us who loved him. And what was the greatest reward he gave us? His example, his words backed by his actions, an example of how to live your life with integrity and dignity. It was and remains a powerful example. So Guyana has lost a legend. His passing has brought an important historical era to an end. This country owes an eternal debt of gratitude to this outstanding human being, Ashton Chase, OE, SC. He was the lawyer's lawyer, a labor expert, a statesman, and a wonderful human being. He will be remembered as a principled man, a virtuous soul, and a kind-hearted gentleman who always helped younger lawyers. He touched and transformed the lives of many and has left a unique and lasting impact on the confluence of law, labor, and politics. He was majestic, fearless, brilliant, and strategic, hence the name the Bengal Tiger. He was a true hero, a Guyanese hero. Dad, you touched so many lives and made the world a better place. You will be missed but never forgotten. To the world, you were just a dad, but you were the world to our family. Thank you for everything. Ashton Chase's presence in our lives was a gift. We should always cherish the memories forever and always. I appreciate you all coming out to remember our father, Ashton Chase, and giving me the opportunity to tell you a little bit more about him. I know you would have been honored to know how many people cared enough to attend. The Chase family thanks everyone for their kind words, expressions of condolences, and sentiments at this most difficult time. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ronald Chase, for that moving tribute, moving eulogy. We now have a tribute by Mr. Carville Duncan, the President of the Federation of Independent Trade Unions of Guyana and the General Secretary of the oldest union in Guyana, the Guyana Labor Union. Brother Carville Duncan.
Good morning. Protocol has been observed. As I stand here this morning, I am forced to reflect on the work done by Mr. Ashton Chase, some of which I have read and some of which I have experienced. Ashton, as it's recorded, started his career in the oldest union in this country, having been influenced by then Burnham, who they were all members of the People's Progressive Party. Ashton, having got a job with the Guyana Labor Union, he continued to support the union on one hand, and on the other hand, having realized the difficulties that the waterfront workers were going through, where their social, economic, and cultural advantages were trampled upon, Ashton decided that he would work vigorously for the upliftment of the GLU. And strange enough, Ashton did that when he was between the age of 17 to 18. He had a vision, and his vision was to ensure that workers get a better deal, to ensure that workers won't have to work 12 and 15 hours a day, and that there be things like workman compensation which will take care of them at the time of injury. And because of his work that he has done in the trade union movement, there was a time when the workers got together and decided that Ashton should be the president of the union. Having at least Critchlow would have passed away. And Ashton fought that position, and as history has recorded it, he did not win, but he did not lose. Nevertheless, that did not change Ashton. He continued to support the Guyana Labor Union. And when I became General Secretary some 42 years ago, Ashton called me to his office and he said, "Carville, this is the direction to which the union should go." And from that day onwards, up to today, I will never forget the guidance that Ashton has given to me. Whenever there were any difficulties, the first person I called was Ashton. Even at that time, he was not the president. A man named Samuel Walker was the president, but Ashton always ready to assist. And true as history will record it, he represented the union pro bono. He did everything for us free. So we would miss Ashton. Why we would miss Ashton? Because He came from us. And I always refer to him as a part of us. I see Ashton first as a trade unionist. And because of that, he has written numerous volumes of books, and he has always supported the trade union cause. He have never, at any point in time, said to me then, I don't think you have a case. He always said to me, I will fight this. And what is peculiar about Ashton? When you go to Ashton's office, he will sit down, have a pen and a piece of paper, and as you talk, he will make notes. But if he say to you that you will have a document in 4 days, you will have it in 3. And before you go to court on any issue, Ashton ensures that he called you in the day before to crystallize his thought, and at the same time ensure that you understand what is expected of you. How can I forget a person like that? History will be unkind to me if I do that. But there are yet some who believe that Ashton should have continued to be a member of the Ghana Labour Union. But because of the powers that be at the time, and because he's a man of peace and not conflict, he decided he will step aside. And he never came back to the GLU until after 1985. When he came back, and we sat down and we talked about it, he said, Carville, the union has a far way to go. And I can recall Ashton said to me prior to his retirement, he said, we must write the history of the GLU. 100 years is coming up. And I said to him, I wasn't wrong for 100 years. I said, Ashton, you'll have to guide us. He said, okay, I will guide you. Now Ashton is no longer here. And so we miss him. But one can easily draw the conclusion that the things that Ashton did and the things that we have learned from him is far beyond the present time he was operating. He was very futuristic, and most of the things he did is to guide us in the future. So I will see Ashton as a trade unionist, but at the same time as a teacher. It's unfortunate, but only the good die young. I was hoping that he'll be around for 100 years. But maybe those who know more than me decide that they will call him to a higher place where he will serve even better. Ashton, we miss you, but we haven't forgotten you. I will say that Ashton memories will live on, not only in Guyana, but throughout the Caribbean. He has done landmark work, and his work should be taught in schools so that the children can understand it is not from where you came, but it's from where you end. And they will also understand that they ought to be constant in their belief. Ashton has never differed from his belief. He stood the road, he walked the walk, and he talked the talk until he died. May his soul rest in peace.
Thank you, Carville, for that tribute. In my opening statement, I did not recognize, did not see Chief Justice George, and I want to welcome her and recognize her presence here. Our next speaker is someone who has had very close association with Ashton. They were in the battlefields together at one time. And so I have great pleasure in calling Mr. Ralph Ramkaran, Senior Counsel, to the podium.
Mrs. Debbie Chase and members of the Chase family, Your Excellency, the President, Honorable Prime Minister, Honorable Chancellor, Mr. Speaker, Honorable Chief Justice, former President, Mr. Donald Ramatar, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. It is apt that we say goodbye to Ashton Chase at the seat of democracy in Guyana. The first time the people of Guyana were allowed to vote in an elections, Ashton was elected as a member of the Legislative Council, which sat in the eastern wing of this building on the upper floor where the Parliament of Guyana sat up to recently. And the entire career of Ashton Chase spanned the modern history of Guyana, beginning in those days or shortly before. And he played a significant pioneering role in creating that Guyana. The Guyana in which we live today has been shaped substantially by the efforts of Ashton Chase. And it is also significant that the statue of Hubert Nathaniel Critchlow stands in the grounds just below the eastern wing of the building. Placed there the instance of a PPP government of the 1960s to much opposition by persons in Guyana, including those who were then in control of the Guyana Labor Union, in which Ashton started his legal career. He was secretary of that union, then called it the British Guyana Labor Union. And it was the first trade union in the British Empire, founded by Hubert Nathaniel Critchlow. I don't know how Critchlow got away with it, but he did. And it initially represented dock workers. Critchlow was a dock worker. From that employment, he joined the Political Affairs Committee, which had been formed in the latter part of 1946. And for some peculiar, odd reason, coincidence, the careers of the Ramkaran family and of Ashton Chase, the careers of several generations of the Ramkaran family, and that of the single career of Ashton Chase coincided, because My father started his life, his public life, as an executive member of the Transport Workers Union in the early 1940s and joined the Political Affairs Committee in or about December 1946. So that association continued from 1946 until recently. It is from just then that the 20-year-old Ashton Chase, along with Cheddy and Janet Jagan and Jocelyn Hubbard, formed the Political Affairs Committee, which laid the foundation for the establishment of the PPP in 1950, which fought for the right to vote for all, independence for Guyana, democracy, and workers' rights. Today, Guyana is a democratic country with a parliament elected by free and fair elections, with an executive accountable to the parliament, with an independent judiciary, and the rights of workers to belong to trade unions of their choice enshrined by law. These achievements are due in no small measure to the work of Ashton Chase. The rights of workers to be represented by trade unions of their choice was a costly struggle in Guyana. For those of you who remember the years of struggle for the Guyana Industrial Workers Union, later named the Guyana Agricultural and General Workers Union, to represent sugar workers. That struggle began in the 1940s and did not end until 1977. All this struggle is within living memory, and it was pioneered by Ashton Chase, who was the first Minister of Labor and who tabled the Labor Relations Bill. I don't remember if that's the correct name. He tabled the Labor Relations Bill, which was patterned after legislation in the United States. But that did not stop the British government from using this allegedly communist tainted legislation, which was copied from the United States, to suspend the Constitution in October 1953. The same bill was presented to the Parliament in 1963, and the result of this was a wave of violence led principally by the Trade Union Congress, the body representing workers. That pioneering effort by Ashton Chase in 1953 did not succeed until 1997, 44 years later, when workers got the right to be represented by a union of their own choice. Along the way, Ashton qualified as a lawyer in 1957, served as president of the Senate in this very building from 1961 to 1964, and a member of Parliament, again in this very building, from 1964 to 1968, as deputy to Cheddy Jagan. In 1968, new challenges arose. Ashton Chase accepted the call to service once again. As president of NACI from the late 60s, the 1970s, and 1980s, he helped to lead the charge against the suppression of workers' rights, both as a militant and as a lawyer. Apart from the numerous cases, important cases, recorded cases, He led in the landmark cases of Siram Timal against the Guyana Sugar Corporation and Muhammad Ali against the Attorney General to help to beat back attempts to diminish workers' rights and trade union rights. As president of the Guyana Bar Association, which was liberated by practicing lawyers in the mid-1970s, to become one of the most important civil society groups at that time, which fought for democracy, free and fair elections, police misconduct, the violation of civil and political rights, disruptions of public activities, and other legal transgressions. These were the forefront of the activities of the Guyana Bar Association, which Ashton Chase led in that period. He became a leading voice for democracy and human rights and appeared in the 3 cases of the state against Arnold Rampersad in the 3 trials in 1976, 1977, and 1978. Ashton made a significant contribution to legal education as chairman of the Council of Legal Education, which you have already heard, and was the author of several works on trade unionism and industrial law. Most important, he's the author of A History of Trade Unionism in Guyana, a reference work to which many of us refer from time to time. He was the chair of the Georgetown Legal Aid Clinic. I had the honor to be working with Ashton alongside him as junior to him in most of these activities, not from the 40s, but in the Guyana Bar Association, in the Georgetown Legal Aid Clinic, and in several cases, including the Arnold Rampersad trials, and in election cases in post-election periods. I began also working against him in labor matters in court from the mid-1970s, an intimidating task, as you would imagine, to go up against the famous Ashton Chase, even at that time. But I survived, and here I am. My 2 sons had an equally intimidating task. At different times, more recently, to do cases against Ashton. And of course, as Ronald said, he's always courteous and helpful, even to an opponent. Ashton Chase was privately very reserved and not introspective. I got the opportunity of speaking to him for extensive periods in the early 2000s when myself and wife Janet, along with Ashton and Debbie, holidayed in India for 3 weeks. But even then, it was difficult to pierce that armor of reserve. But he did open up occasionally. While he never spoke of himself or his contributions to Guyana, or to trade unionism, or law, he was an extremely gregarious person. I don't know that many people saw that side of him. He enjoyed the company of friends and entertained regularly. We had the opportunity, myself and wife, on numerous occasions of tasting the hand of Debbie, who bore the burden of those entertaining efforts over a very long period of time and on many, many occasions. If I never thanked you before, Debbie, I do so now. Ashton was awarded the Order of Excellence for his service to Guyana. I extend, on behalf of the Bar Association, to Ashton's wife, Deborah, his children, Ronald, Sarita, and Pauline, his grandchildren and relatives, the condolences of the Guyana Bar. Thank you very much.
We will now have a tribute from the General President of the largest union in Guyana and perhaps the Caribbean, one who's the previous speaker, Ralph Ramkaran's father. Boise was a beacon light, and I think today, Boise, Komal Chan, and Sri Chan would have liked to say a few words to Ashton. But we have a young stalwart, Member of Parliament, President of GAU, C. Paul Narayan, to address us.
Committee Chairman, Excellency the President, Prime Minister, Mr. Speaker of the National Assembly, Ministers of Government, other distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Comrades, today we are gathered here to say farewell to Comrade Ashton Chase. On behalf of the Guyana Agricultural and General Workers Union and the workers of this country, it is indeed an honor for me to bring this tribute. Comrade Chase was a trade unionist first, and then an eminent lawyer. In some quarters, he was seen as a bulldog, while others knew him as the Bengal tiger. On his passing, GAU described him as a beacon of hope for those workers who were cheated by their employers. Comrade Ashton Chase grew up in a family associated with trade unionism. His grandmother was an executive member of the British Guyana Labour Union, and young Ashton developed an early affinity to the trade union movement. He became an activist of the British Guyana Labour Union, which no doubt served to mold him into that visionary champion of workers' rights and the voice of the voiceless. Comrade Chase was a man of immense integrity, compassion, and resilience. He understood the struggles faced by his fellow citizens and dedicated his life to bringing about positive changes. From an early age, he recognized the power of education to uplift individuals and communities. His relentless pursuit of knowledge led him to become a lawyer, where he fought tirelessly for the rights of the marginalized and disenfranchised. Though being a lawyer, his trade union touch was never lost. He had worked alongside the father of trade unionism in Guyana, Comrade Hubert Nathaniel Critchlow, as the Assistant General Secretary of the British Guyana Labour Union. He was also president of NACI. Mr. Chase had close contact with workers from the waterfront, employees in the Transport and Harbors Department, Rice Marketing Board, government employees, Sawmill Workers Union, sugar workers, among others. Comrade Chase, up to the time of his demise, was honorary president of NACI. For us in GAU, we remember the many instances when he stood in the courts with us and secured victories on behalf of workers. Comba Chase played a pivotal role in the development of Guyana's legal system, working to ensure that the rule of law prevailed and that justice was accessible to all. He championed legal reforms aimed at protecting the rights of the most vulnerable, and his efforts led to significant improvement in the judicial system. Comba Chase's name is associated with many landmark labor cases and arbitration tribunals, championing the interests of workers. Comba Chase was a founding member of the Political Affairs Committee, which evolved into the People's Progressive Party, the colony's first mass-based political organization. And incidentally, Comba Chetty, in his book Western Trial, said that Ashton Chase would have been the chairman of the party had he not given way at that time to Forbes Burnham. Comba Chase played a central role within the PPP and became a significant figure in Guyana's political landscape. In 1953, he served as the Minister of Labor, Industry and Commerce in the first PPP government. Notably, Chase was instrumental in introducing a labor relations bill following a sugar workers' strike led by the Guyana Industrial Workers Union. Chase's effort to pass the labor relations bill, which aimed to recognize the GIW and address workers' rights, drew concern from the colonial powers along with others. Ultimately, in 1953 October, the British removed Chase and the PPP government from office, suspending the Constitution. In 1997, the Trade Union Recognition Act, which is a revised version of the Labor Relations Bill, was enacted in Guyana under the PPP civic government, and Comrade Ashton Chase was appointed the first chairman of the Trade Union Recognition and Certification Board under that law. In 1985, he was appointed as senior counsel, a distinction he had been denied during the presidency of Forbes Burnham, who passed away earlier that year. Throughout his career, Comba Chase contributed to various organizations and served in significant positions. He was a member of the Public Service Commission, vice president of the Guyana Economic Society, and also he held multiple terms as president of the Guyana Bar Association and served on the Council of Legal Education, including a tenure as the council's chairman. Comrade Ashton Chase's legacy will continue to inspire generations to come. His unwavering belief in the power of justice, education, and unity will forever guide our path towards a better future. Today, as we pay tribute and say farewell to this son of Guyana, let us recommit ourselves to the values he held, and let us carry his vision forward as we strive to build a stronger, more prosperous and inclusive Guyana. Our sincere condolences to the family, friends, and comrades of Ashton Chase. Farewell, comrade. Thank you very much.
We now move to another tribute, and that tribute will be read by the Honorable Attorney General and Minister of Legal Affairs, Anil Nandalal, and it's from the Prime Minister of St. Lucia, Honorable Philip Pierre.
Mistress Chase, the children and relative of Mr. Ashton Chase, His Excellency, the Honorable Prime Minister, the Honorable Chancellor of the Judiciary, the Honorable Speaker of the National Assembly, my cabinet colleagues, former President, Donald Ramatar, members of the Diplomatic Corps, ladies and gentlemen, I have the honor of reading a prepared speech a tribute to Mr. Ashton Chase by the Prime Minister and leader of the St. Lucia Labour Party, Honorable Philip J. Pierre. Comrades, Guyana and the Caribbean have lost the last of the founding members of the two most major political entities that have sparked the birth of its anti-colonial struggle and of the Republic's longest-lasting political party, both of which left indelible imprints on Guyana's history of trade unionism, not only in his homeland, but also in the region and beyond. Ashton Chase was a special figure who lived by his life's expectation, a very figurative life. Born in 1926, he would have been only 20 years old in 1946 when he joined the Jagans and others to establish the Political Affairs Committee, which led to the formation of the People's Progressive Party 4 years later in 1950, when he was only 24 years old. Between 1946 and his death at age 96, therefore, the indomitable Ashton Chase will have spent 77 years, 7 years longer than the proverbially allocated 70, contributing to the struggle for Guyana's freedom and independence. Comrades, 924 months of a life struggle is no small stretch, as seeing the sun rise and shine 28,105 times is no small achievement. Indeed, it is one that's both longer and larger than life. The most important things have already been said about Ashton Chase's achievements in the political, trade union, and legal fields, and his long representation of the country's legal fraternity as president of the nation's Bar Association. He served in Parliament, was a trade unionist alongside the likes of towering figures like Hubert Nathaniel Critchlow, was an author and historian who also trained lawyers across the Commonwealth Caribbean, including St. Lucia. Ashton Chase was also well known to the veteran trade union leader and founder of the St. Lucia Labour Party, SLP, the late Sir George F.L. Charles, as the progressive parties in the British West Indies at the time, including the PPP and the SLP, joined to establish the West Indies Labour Party in the age of the short-lived West Indies Federation. But Comrade Ashton Chase's longest-lasting legacy will be the fact that not only was he the last of the Guyana equivalent of the fabled Mohicans, who not only lit the spark that set the rest of Guyana's struggle alight in 1946, but he also lived the next 77 years witnessing every single gain and loss over those almost 8 decades. Comrade Chase saw the PAC grow into the PPP, and he went abroad and returned and served the PPP as a cabinet minister and a fighter for the working class. And after becoming a lawyer in 1957 in the United Kingdom, he lived on and on to see the PPP in and out of office between 1964 and 1992. Comrade Chase also lived long enough to see the PPP survive 28 years in political opposition and return to office in 1992. And then in and out between then and now. He witnessed the birth of the PPP Civic Alliance and all the other Guyanese political electoral alliances. And in the end, he saw the race was not for the swift, but those who can endure the most. Comrade Chase saw the PPP take hold of Guyana's economy in 2020, and in his last 3 years, he saw the way in which the party he helped form emerge highly victorious in the last 2 national and local government elections. And he lived to see the party he helped form start the process of ultimate achievement of the original goal of both the PAC and the PPP. That is, to ensure the nation's resources are spent in the people's interest, ensuring oil incomes are spread across all borders and boundaries in Guyana, and in other words, putting the people first. And that policy of putting the people first is also guaranteed in the way in which the PPP's leadership of the economy has put Guyana on a non-stop flight towards accelerated benefits for people all the time as the world's fastest growing oil economy and destined to be the richest nation in South America. Putting people first, this is also the guiding principle of the party I lead in government and in all we do as a party in government. Our party's motto is bread, freedom, and justice. And our government's motto is putting people first. And like the PPP has done, and Comrade Chase saw before leaving, this is a standard that we have continued to bear with our red flags from 1945, when the SLP was born, and in 1950 when the PPP was born, through common electoral experiences of being cheated out of office in 1964 to being together again in office at another crucial time in Guyana and St. Lucia's and CARICOM and world history. Comrade Chase left with the knowledge and experience of having lived in a Guyana that is finally started along a new path he and other founders of the PAC and the PPP would have never imagined. And it is in this context that we say for sure that he will rest in eternal peace without having ever regretted helping set the head cover stones for those 2 major political structures that will forever be part of his and Guyana's history. We extend to the Chase's family and to all Guyana our deepest condolences. I thank you.
That was a message from the Honorable Philip Peer, Prime Minister of St. Lucia, read by Attorney General Anil Nandalal. The next tribute is going to be given by the Speaker of the National Assembly, Honorable Mansour Nadir. My pleasure to call him.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Your Excellency, President Ali, Honorable Prime Minister, Madam Chancellor, members of Cabinet, President Ramatar, the family of Mr. Chase, Excellencies of the Diplomatic Corps, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. We've heard a lot about a man who throughout my life I heard a lot about, and in particular had the opportunity to listen to him for about 43 years. And I want to bring a different light to his contributions, because many of us would not understand the environment in which our founding fathers, and Ashton being one of them, found themselves. So I roll back the years to Samuel Walker, Ashton Chase, Cyril Belgrave on the waterfront. My dad migrated from Triumph with a wife from Chesney in Albion to live in Alboystown in 1947. And he found work on the waterfront. And at that time, there were independent ports, and there was a jostling for work among the stevedores. And these gentlemen, led by the Guyana Labor Union, Carville, would now come together to fight for an association of stevedores represented by the Guyana Labor Union for a fair distribution of the work among the ports. And yes, Pauline, your dad was a leading light. And so Samuel Walker, an ordinary man who became President General of the Union, would, some Friday afternoons after they received the pay packet, come home and they would share a quarter, my dad and him. My dad was not literate. I taught him how to write his name. Couldn't sign his name. But a simple man like Ashton, he would listen, but his eyes would pierce the discussion. Thus, my involvement with the name Ashton Chase. One of the founding legacies that was left, now disbanded. When you come down Lombard Street, there's a roundhouse. I think Food for the Poor might be operating it. So the struggle at that time, Nanda, was for the stevedore to get a fair share of work. And that roundhouse was built as what is called, in Guyanese parlance, we say the Kalin An. Remember we say O for apple and A for orange, right? So, calling on. So you would go there to call on, to get a job. But more importantly, if you didn't get work, because all the ports had to put the jobs in the calling on station in the union, you got $17.60, guaranteed. And our rent was $18 with 8 children and 2 parents. And so initially my dad and I would go down and he would, when it's out of school, and we'd walk from Hog Street or Boystown to there, and many times he wouldn't get work, so we'd stop at Sussex Street, throw a line, and catch a karass. At least we got curry. Now, this was the context of the stevedores at the time. And Sis from Alexander Village is laughing because his mom, his grandmother sold at the La Penitence Market. So this was the context at the time for the stevedores, for the sugar workers. And this is where the initiatives, the support, the actions of Ashton Chase and the union leaders at the time, this is where they shape today, and people like me. The other thing that we forget, when Ashton served a second term in Parliament, in his first term he was Minister of Labor, Industry and Commerce. And I happen to have straddled those ministries myself, being Labor Minister and being Minister of Tourism, Industry and Commerce. And every time we talk, again, he would listen, he wouldn't look at you, he would give a little smile and a talk. But when you look at his contributions, he spoke on everything. IMF, banking, rice, everything he spoke on. And there was a period after 1964 when the political landscape was legally being changed for suppression. So the laws were being forced down at that time, and a party I'm associated with supported it. And that was another context with which, or within which he worked in the east wing of this building. And if you look at the readings, and I happen to have gone through some of them as we prepared for the 70th anniversary of our democracy. And when you look at some of those readings, he was like today's Anil Nandalal. He spoke on everything. He spoke on everything. And I don't want to give away any bedroom secrets. I'll tell you where I spend my Thursday evenings publicly. So, bedroom secret, last evening I was not sleeping in my wife's bed, and I went to Prashad Nagar where Marcia, my daughter, lives, and I have a deal with my younger grandson. So I was brushing over the program, and normally the bedroom secret is, she says 9 o'clock is bedtime, but we don't sleep. We would chat, look at baby pictures, we talk. And so I was doing some work last night, and he was reading. And he said, they call me Ba, B-A. He said, Ba, Mr. Chase was a founder of the non-aligned movement. So even at this late and last moments of his life, he's influenced people. And I said to my younger grandson, yes, because Guyana was, and he was a founding father of Guyana. And I want to leave you with something that Ashton said in the National Assembly. And I don't want to misquote him, so I will refer to some notes. In 1965, July 15, almost a year to today, when the government of the day was introducing legislation. 1965, we'd already killed 176 people in racial riots and maimed over 1,100. And things were a little bit calmer. The premier then moved to extend the state of emergency. That's why I was saying that period was one preparing the legislative framework for what happened later. And Ashton said, and I quote, "Let me predicate my remarks by stating that violence in the solution of political problems is abhorred by me. Insofar as the party of which I'm a member is concerned, we are committed to the solution of political problems of this country by peaceful means," end quote. And we're living that, Mr. President. We're living that. Yesterday, I do an annual lecture at the University of Ashton in Argentina, and I did my 2023 presentation yesterday. And it was on the issue of democracy, economy, and trade. And the President, Ashton, 10 years ago, 80% of the world democracy were the top 10 economies. Same thing today. And by 2035, it will still be democratic countries dominating trade and economy. And I take this quote from Ashton because this is the only way we must go. Let us live Ashton's words. Mrs. Chase and the family, on behalf of the members of Parliament, the clerk and our staff, and on behalf of my family and I, our deepest and sincerest condolences. Thank you very much.
When he was approaching his 96th birthday, Senior Counsel Ashton Chase called me and said, "Comrade Gopal, you have some time to drop me to the Court of Appeal." I said, "By all means, but what is it about?" I know that he had stopped practicing because of the COVID and other things. He said, "We have to get the records straight for your matter." I said, "What matter? I don't have any matter." He said, "Yes, you remember that long 10 years ago story with the GPSU against you?" I said, "What? That's all? No, I've made peace with Patrick Yard. I'm going to the office. I'm doing lectures for them. And Patrick and I are friends. I think there wouldn't be any case. I'll talk with him." And he said, "That's not how the law works." So I took him to the Court of Appeal, sorted out the records. The lawyers from the other side was there promptly, and I said this man was right. So I thought that having built a relationship, they would have said, look, don't worry with this thing, the matter is finished. It was not to be, it had to go to the Court of Appeal. Thereafter, Ashton stood up and fought the case there. Luckily, the decision was handed down on December 2022, just months ago, in my favor, clearing my name. When we were walking out the court, he said, I just wanted to clear your name. I'm ever and eternally grateful to Ashton for what he has done. What I am today is because of Ashton Chase. I would have remained a young man, maybe selling Moabi, and become a very good entrepreneur, a job I was doing and I know well to do, Moabi, Buns and Chana. But he took me out of that and put me into the sugar industry to work and to toil. And as I said, I am what Ashton expected of me, and I have not disappointed him. And by the way, AG, we didn't get a cost. So there was one incident with Ralph from Karan, Bonnie Rams, myself, Ashton, when I was singing Solidarity Forever and We Shall Overcome after the ERP budget. They call it the empty rice pot budget. And while singing Solidarity Forever and We Shall Overcome, in the midst of singing this hymn with priests and nuns and trade union leaders, two bongo van came, picked us up and took us to Brickdam. We were all locked up, a number of us. Ashton heard, Ralph came, Mr. Ramson came, and a number of other lawyers came to our rescue while they're talking. I think the two active were Ralph from Karan and Bonnie Ramson. And while they were talking, some way they got the whiff that these boys will be released, some of them. But two will go down. And so after about 4 o'clock reach, I saw Komal Chan coming out. That was after all the other guys who were arrested. But before they were going out, Ralph brought 2 boxes of chicken in the rough. And I said, what? Ralph said, hey, Gopal, you take this and let Daniels take this. So we said, straight man, we were shocked. We called him, we said, Jared, let me eat out this thing, come on and again. Ralph is a good friend of ours. While we were about to finish the eating of the chicken in the rough, the others went. They put Daniels in handcuff, me in handcuff, in 2 different bongo van. And I look at Ralph, he looked at me, looked at Mr. Ramson, and said, what am I going on? He said, look like you all going your separate ways. So I went to Kitty Police Station where I was locked up for the night. And Daniels was in Ivlery. But obviously these are lawyers with intelligence gathering, and they knew what the police operation was and what the political operations were against people at that time, those crying out. And so Danny and I spent the night in the police lockup. It would have been more serious based on the information we received, what was going to happen. And so the next day we were going to have the 4 union meeting at Kitty Market Square. Mr. Ramson appeared, we got bail, and I think Ralph was there too. So we gone to this meeting without even change of clothes overnight, since the next day stink perhaps, because we were in a very filthy lockup. But in the night, in the middle of the night, I don't know how Ashton Chase was able to get the police to allow me to come out and talk with him. And he came and he talked, and he said, just be careful. Plans are afoot to deal with you and Daniels. Watch what you speak at Kitty. So we went to court, went to the public meeting. Then I saw Mr. Ramson standing right by the podium. said, Chasey sent me to watch you. Be careful who you talk, right? So I continued to speak, and it's getting worked up, and with the crowd on your side, I made statements which were perhaps inflammatory. And Bunny pulled me off the stage and said, let's go. So as I finished my speech, he said, let's go. He said, perhaps they might charge you for treason now. So he took me away. We met with Mr. Chase, and he said, just cool it. And we cooled the process. Eventually, for singing Solidarity and We Shall Overcome, I was fined $22. It was a lot of money then. I didn't have the money. I said, I prefer to stay in jail. I'm paying none. I tell Mr. Ramson, please appeal this thing. He said, but if you appeal it, you still gotta go to jail. Somebody gotta pay this fine. Let me pay. He went and he paid the fine. So I owed Mr. Ramson too during this fight. I thought Mr. Chase would have paid him, but they were so close, I don't think he would have taken money. But that's the story. Ralph Ramkaran, police matter, he saved me again, storing food stuff. He and Chase came for the bauxite strike in Linden. And while we were storing these food, the police came, seized everything. Black eye, rice, everything destined for the bauxite workers. And I stood up to block the thing. Ralph said, man, this ignorant body cleared the way, left them. They had their big guns. I thank you, maybe you saved my life. But I was determined to protect those food. Anyway, having said that, Chase, Ralph Ramkaran, Charles, Rishi Ram Ramson are persons who have been by our side throughout these struggles, but more so Charles. When all of them gone to sleep, we would take a drink now and again and talk how we will do the next day. I therefore want to say that we are indebted to these individuals, and I know will say we will have before His Excellency a tribute by the Honorable Ralph Gonsalves, Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, a true fighter for workers' cause, a champion, a trade union at heart, and a politician, a lawyer, a statesman. Speaker, here we are.
To the government and people of Guyana, I am here at the Prime Minister's office at the Parliament of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. I am here at the Prime Minister's office at the Parliament of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, taking a break to pay extremely high regard, special appreciation for the life and work of the iconic Ashton Chase. This revolutionary personality, this man from the bowels of the people of Guyana, a socialist, a man who loved the poor and the working people, his life dedicated to loving the poor and the working people. His partnership with Chedi Jagan, with Janet, all the progressive people in the People's Progressive Party of Guyana and the progressive people of Guyana, the revolutionary people. Ashton Chase accomplished so much to uplift the working people and the peasantry, both in the urban and in the rural areas of Guyana. He was a lawyer, highly skilled. He was a scholar, an author of the seminal book on trade unionism in Guyana. He has been an example to me, a mentor, a man who loved humanity, a man of peace, of caring, a tremendous father, a family man, a man of greatness. Ashton Chase, along with his colleagues, helped to remake post-colonial Caribbean, fought against colonialism, racism, poverty, colonialism, imperialism, to build a free people, a people who come from a civilization, a Caribbean civilization, which is noble and which has a trajectory for further ennoblement. Ashton Chase made his mark in bringing us along and helping us to embrace a better future. He gave us hope, and importantly, he taught us solidarity and a love which is an ever fixed mark that looks on tempests and is never shaken. I celebrate the life of Ashton Chase, celebrate his work, commemorate his life and living. Let us rejoice that he has been among us, a great man. God bless.
The Honorable Prime Minister Ralph Gonsalves to now invite the leader of this nation, the President of this nation, His Excellency President Dr. Irfan Ali. Let's welcome the leader of One Guyana.
Thank you very much, very kindly. Prime Minister, please. Chancellor, Chief Justice, or Attorney General, Speaker of the National Assembly, former Speaker of the National Assembly, former President, distinguished members of the Cabinet, members of the diplomatic community, more importantly, ladies and gentlemen, all of you, good morning. We're still in the morning. Today we are celebrating the life of a man that was very simple. And I want to extend that. Don't be fooled by Pauline, but a family that is very simple. A family and a man that is very humble. A man who selflessly gave to Guyana. We are celebrating the life of a man who had all the attributes of integrity. A man who has contributed to the social, political, economic development of our country. A man who would have only approved of my dress code this morning of all who came to this stage, at this event. A man who has shaped the life of many Guyanese, but more importantly, has shaped the course of the history of our country, and has shaped it in a form in which today we enjoy a free and democratic society. Put your hands together to this legend. I had many interactions with him, and I know for sure he would have not have approved of this activity this morning. I know for sure he do not like people speaking about him. At the launch of the book, The Bengal Tiger, Nanda and retired Justice Ramsden, I'm very happy you guys are together here. At the launch of that book, he felt embarrassed sitting there, and he said this. He felt embarrassed at the tribute that was paid to him. I want to pause to say that I know former President Ramatar would not be speaking, but I know he would have loved to speak today, because I know for sure they shared a very close relationship. And as General Secretary of the PPP, I know Comrade Chase is someone who he consulted regularly, because I was a regular visitor in the office of the General Secretary when our former President was General Secretary. I also know that he's a man who stood up for justice and offered his service whenever he felt there was injustice. I would never forget, and I would borrow the phrase from Carville, when the powers to be at that time thought it fit to take me at 4 a.m. in the morning to what is the SOCU headquarters. And I recall retired Justice Ramson and Ashton Chase offering, without asking, advice. My lawyers at that time, which included the Attorney General, would tell you that they were called and given advice because he felt strongly on the matter. And I want to thank him. I never got the opportunity to thank him publicly, but I want to thank him, and I want to thank, as I have this opportunity now, I know you're going to live a very, very long time, retired Justice Ramson, but let me thank you now also for ensuring that you not only researched the law, but you wrote your opinions and you photocopied the pages. And you not only sent it to me, but you ordered me in your office so that you could have explained it to me. These are characteristics of a certain level of integrity, a certain level of calling that goes beyond the practice of your profession. You see, we are all blessed in different ways. We all have different qualities. But the way in which we utilize the qualities that we have in service to humanity is what separates us from each other. So you can have many exceptional lawyers. Many would finish their career very, very rich and wealthy. Many will finish their career with the excellence of service to humanity. And it is not something we must take for granted. A man who straddled various dimensions of national life, the law, politics, family, economics, science, philosophy, ideology, because at the time when he would have led the movement for workers and for political freedom and democracy, it is important for us to understand that that was an era of ideological positioning. And we cannot divorce the ideological debate and the ideological discussions that characterize that era. And that is what positioned the thinking and work of people like Comrade Chase in the global context, because they were part of a global conversation in which philosophical and ideological positions were debated in the interests of service to humanity. And we must not forget that. So the intellectual work that characterized their lives, and that is why you have these brilliant piece of writing, and if you research the speeches in Parliament by some of the earlier members of Parliament, you would see the brilliance of thinking in speech and writing. And I think we must not ever forget that that was an important part of their life and their contribution. Now, the late Comrade Ashton Chase was a great Guyanese. And I would listen keenly to the wonderful and deserving tributes which were paid to him. And I am firm in my belief that he was one of the most outstanding individuals that our country has produced. And I think you should put your hands together. And the family should find tremendous comfort in the fact that Comrade Chase has set a bar, an example for you. And I must say, this is a family that continues to live a life of service to Guyana, and we must put our hands together for the family. Not only was he a great man, but importantly, he was a good man. He was not after fame, but preferred working in service to the working class of this country. He was good because he served the workers of Guyana and did so with selfless dedication. In a world where heroes and heroines are often the stuff of fiction, it is a source of great national pride that Guyana can count amongst its sons someone of the pedigree of Ashton Chase. His life straddled many spheres, but his passions were most pronounced in the vocations of labor, the law, and the liberation of Guyana. Very importantly, the liberation of Guyana. Indeed, for him, he struggled for workers' rights. His struggle for workers' rights was inseparable from the struggle for national liberation. The law was to be an instrument in the struggle for both. And this was the context in which he saw the law. He saw the law as something that was alive, something that was a tool, an instrument in the work of representing the struggle for the people. And that is why he was such a brilliant force, because he was able to bring to life the law in the interests of the working people. And that is why he was so deservingly admired. The Caribbean independence was birthed on the backs of the struggles and sacrifices of the working class. Comrade Chase was part and parcel of the trade unions' agitation for freedom from colonial rule. And this is another point. The trade unions' agitation was not limited to workers' rights. The trade unions' agitation at that time went far beyond. The trade unions' agitation was to ensure the freedom of our country. It was to ensure that we break ourselves away from colonial rule. And indeed, that struggle led to us breaking ourselves away from colonial rule, and this deserves a round of applause. He began his advocacy on behalf of workers and dipped his feet in trade unionism from a very early age. Comrade Chase achieved immense accolades in trade unionism. He dedicated his 1976 publication, Trade Union Law in the Caribbean, to his many friends on the waterfronts. He may have climbed the ladder of success, but his feet were firmly planted among the working class. It was in recognition of this that the workers held him in the highest esteem, and his country held him as an important pillar in the struggle for national liberation. When he co-founded the Political Affairs Committee, it was because he saw this as an important vehicle to advance pro-labor aspirations. Within the PAC, Comrade Chase stood tall, literally and figuratively, championing the cause of workers and protesting poverty, exploitative landlordism, land shortage, and land tenure insecurity. Very important component of his life. Through study groups, and this is another important part of his work, he believed strongly in educating the workers. He believed strongly in educating the population about the struggle. He did not just lead people into a struggle. but he educated persons on the circumstances that necessitate the struggle. So what did he do? They formed study groups, the PAC bulletin, and direct contact with the working class. Comrade Chase helped to shape working class consciousness. It was not only about providing the leadership, it was about shaping the consciousness of the working class. The PSC would help ready him for his role as a political activist. He became part of the PPP that would reignite the nationalist struggle and push Guyana faster towards political independence. When the PPP was established, Comrade Chase naturally was part of its leadership. This was his second vocation. Within the ranks of the People's Progressive Party, Comrade Chase emerged as a key player in the nationalist struggle. As is known, he was appointed as Minister of Labor in the 1953 PPP government. Unfortunately, the term of the government was truncated as a result of the suspension of the Constitution in 1953. Yet, in this very short time, much was achieved on the labor front during the 4-month reign of the government. Comrade Chase was at the forefront of efforts to improve the wages of chauffeurs and cinema workers, and to the young people, you might say, how important were chauffeurs and cinema workers in those days. But in the circumstances of Guyana in those days, these were very key and important jobs to provide for families and communities. Very, very key. He fought and led work to institute an 8-hour workday for factory workers and reduce the working hours of watchmen and increase their pay, to investigate the conditions of employment and wages of domestics, to advance plans for improvement in working men's compensation, including protection against injuries on the job and benefits to dependents, and to press for recognition of the rights of workers in the sugar union to union of their choice. Comrade Chase would have taught everyone around him to be conscious of the environment that they're in. And in being conscious, I saw some very well-dressed young people earlier struggling with a camera. Obviously, they're on work study. I want to say to them that 28 years ago, I too was on work study at the office of the president struggling with the camera, because that is where I was placed. So don't worry, continue to hold fast and make use of this opportunity of understanding the work environment and what it entails. Comrade Chase was part of the opposition benches in Parliament between 1964 and 1968. He was a force to be reckoned with. He was known for his preciseness, his deliberate language, and his well-prepared arguments. He presented in Parliament with heart and conviction, with belief and a sense of purpose. He was persuasive, but importantly, he was penetrative. But most of all, he was insightful. The depth of thought, and I urge those who love history and understand how important history and research is to go through his early speeches in Parliament. Comrade Chase, in some ways, was prophetic in his pronouncement in the House. He warned us on at least 2 occasions that we were heading into a dangerous state of affairs. Speaking in the House at the 18th sitting of the First Parliament of Guyana on the 21st of November 1966, the Honorable Ashton Chase described the National Security Miscellaneous Provision Bill 1966 as, and I quote, an atrocious piece of legislation. This is what he said, and I'm going to quote. The bill is an atrocious piece of legislation. It was conceived with an end in view that is aimed not at national security, but at the destruction of the legitimate opposition in the country. I speak tonight not because I'm afraid. We accept what will come to us, and we are prepared for what will be meted out to us. But I speak in the interest of freedom, for which we have fought, and which is now being abused by those who occupy the government benches. End of quote. This is a man speaking at a time when they knew the dangers of saying what he was saying, exposing himself to the dangers that existed, but did so selflessly in the interests of freedom and democracy. That is what you call selfless action. He warned us that the bill was the first step towards the establishment of a fascist dictatorship. And guess what? He was proven correct. It was the first time that he raised an alarm over what was to come. On the 23rd of October 1968, during the debate on the representation of the people, Adaptation and Modification of Laws Bill of 1968, he forewarned that the basis was being laid for electoral fraud. This is what he said, and I quote, "The regulations and act, in my view, are laying the basis for fraudulent elections in this country. They're laying the basis for rigged elections in Guyana. We'll have a government by fraud. I have never before seen the depth of political rascality to which these laws descend." I just enjoy the language and I can put myself back there. This is an evil genius afoot. I say without fear of contradiction that if our elections are going to be held under what we have before us this afternoon, this particular bill, the results of the elections will be predetermined. What vision and foresight this man had. Not only the beauty of language and presentation, but the depth of thinking. And the way in which, just thinking back in those days, he would have captured the imagination and gripped the consciousness of the people. If Anil Nanlal was back then and had the media coverage he has now, you could have imagined how far this speech would have gone. He would have not allowed the moment to pass. But this is the man we celebrate. He warned us then, as I said, that this bill was dangerous for democracy. Much has occurred over the years, and we have seen the improvement, electoral reform. But today, we celebrate free and fair elections, we celebrate the democracy. But we must never ever forget the pallbearers of democracy. And Comrade Chase was one of those. In 1968, he sailed not away from politics, but with politics into a new area. And that is the legal profession. Much has been already said about his exploits in the courtroom. I can only add at this stage that he's written himself into constitutional and labor laws history. He has earned himself the title of a legal lion. Pauline, you have much more to do. It was through his success in cases such as Timal versus the Guyana Sugar Corporation Limited and Muhammad Ali versus the Attorney General of Guyana. And you know, these cases are so important that every time someone associated with the labor portfolio or Attorney General speak in Parliament, this is the go-to case. This is the handbook. I see C. Paul laughing, even C. Paul now. This is the handbook for these guys. All workers of Guyana owe an eternal debt of gratitude to Ashton Chase for the legal victories he and others secure on their behalf. Now, I want to make this point. Not because you see a name in a case meant that that case was associated to that person. All of Comrade Chase's battle, retired Justice Ramsden here too, their battle resounded to the benefit of all of Guyana. And that is the context of his battles. All workers of this country must be grateful to this legend that is before us. Ashton Chase was part of the legal team, and I know former President Ramotar and the leadership of the PPP would want me to say this. Comrade Chase was part of the legal team that represented Arnold Rampersad. Ashton Chase was a symbol of grace and elegance. In all that I've said, this man was a symbol of grace and elegance. Two of the things Pauline took from him fully. Pauline is my good friend. I can rub her anytime. He has a dignified presence that resonated with the weight of his conviction and the wisdom of the years of struggle within the union movement. The Cooperative Republic of Guyana has honored him deservedly with the nation's highest national award, the Order of Excellence. Today, as we say goodbye to Comrade Ashton Chase, we do so fully aware of his selfless service to our country. We do so with pride in our hearts that he walked and worked among us. His life reminds us that our sole purpose in this human existence is service to humanity. Today he leaves us the same way I would like to leave, with pieces of cotton that symbolizes the simplicity of his human form. But beyond those pieces of cotton, he leaves us with a rich history of service, selflessness, and upliftment of Guyana and the Guyanese people. He is a national treasure. On behalf of the government and people of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, and on my own behalf and that of my family, I extend heartfelt condolences to his wife, children, relatives, and all those who mourn his passing. Before I go, I want to say to the grandchildren of Comrade Chase, you have a very important responsibility of living the legacy of this legend, of ensuring that in your life, henceforth, the character, dignity, honor of this man is reflected in the way you carry your life forward. I thank you, and God bless you.
Thank you, Your Excellency, and this brings us to the end of the proceedings this morning. We are going to move from here to passing through Nasi headquarters for a brief stop, and then to the Good Hope crematorium, where the body will be cremated. We thank all of you for being part of this memorable but sad occasion, an occasion which we say farewell. Dear brother, dear comrade, dear friend, may your soul rest in peace.
Song of Guyanese chair. Song of Guyanese chair.